Some mornings, your whole body feels like wet sand. Getting out of bed feels like wading through it. Food doesn't interest you, not even the things you love. Even a text from a friend feels like too much effort to answer. Your thoughts move slower, like they're pushing through the same sand as your limbs. You have felt this exact combination before. Heavy limbs, no appetite, a pull to disappear from everyone around you. It's the same list you get with a bad flu. Except there is no fever this time. No virus. No infection a doctor can find anywhere in your blood. And that gap is the whole story. Your brain built this shutdown for one job only, fighting a sickness that, this time, was never actually there. This isn't a metaphor. It's closer to an old setting, left running on very old software. Scientists have a name for the flu-like shutdown your body runs during a real infection. They call it sickness behavior. Every animal with an immune system runs some version of it. Fatigue, appetite loss, withdrawal from the group, a total loss of interest in anything but survival. It isn't laziness, and it isn't sadness either. It's a coordinated, whole-body retreat, switched on from the outside by your own immune system. You didn't choose it, and you can't simply decide your way out of it, any more than you could decide your way out of a fever. What if depression wasn't a separate problem sitting next to that? What if it was the exact same program, misfiring? The neuroscientist Robert Dantzer spent years studying this shutdown, directly inside the immune system. He showed that certain immune signaling molecules, called cytokines, don't just fight infection down in the body. They travel up to the brain and rewire behavior on purpose. Give a healthy animal an injection of these molecules and watch what happens next. It stops eating. It stops exploring its cage. It stops seeking out its own kind. It even loses interest in sugar water, a treat almost no rodent will ever turn down on its own. Its body isn't reacting to a real threat yet. There's no wound, no visible danger anywhere. It's preparing for one, in advance, purely on a chemical hunch. Dantzer's conclusion was blunt. This shutdown looks like depression because, biologically, it is running on much of the same circuitry. Why would evolution build a brain that can hijack your own motivation like that? Picture an ancestor with an open wound, deep in a landscape with no antibiotics and no hospitals for 100 miles. The single greatest threat to that ancestor was no longer the wound itself. It was the infection creeping in behind it, quietly, over the following days. Energy spent walking, or hunting, or mating, was energy stolen directly from the fight against that infection. So natural selection built a switch that seizes control the moment danger is detected. Stop moving. Stop socializing. Stop wanting anything except rest and warmth. Every calorie saved was a calorie handed straight to the immune system, at exactly the moment it needed it most. The psychiatrists Andrew Miller and Charles Racine studied this trade-off across decades of research and reached the same evolutionary conclusion. Depression, in their view, is not a malfunction. It's an ancient, overeager bodyguard built for a world crawling with infection, still standing guard today, long after the world around it changed. Here's the twist that convinced a lot of skeptical scientists. What if you could prove this switch fires, even when nothing is actually wrong? The psychologist Naomi Eisenberger ran an experiment to test exactly that. Healthy volunteers were given a tiny, harmless dose of a substance that tricks the immune system into believing it's under attack. No virus, no injury, nothing dangerous inside it at all. Within hours, those volunteers reported measurably lower mood. And something even stranger showed up alongside it. A sharp rise in feelings of social disconnection, the sense of being cut off from other people, for no reason they could name. Their body had triggered the exact shutdown built for a real infection, over a chemical imposter carrying zero actual danger. If an experiment like that just explained a low mood you felt with no obvious cause, that's exactly the kind of thing this channel exists to dig up. The like button tells YouTube more people should see it. This isn't just a lab trick with one strange afternoon of altered mood. It shows up years in advance, in real bodies across entire lifetimes. The psychiatrist Golem Kondakar tracked thousands of children from age 9 into their 20s, using nothing more than ordinary blood tests taken at routine checkups. Children with higher inflammation markers, with no depression in sight yet, no sign of it anywhere, were significantly more likely to develop depression more than a decade later. The inflammation didn't follow the low mood. It came first, sometimes by 15 years. Something in the body was quietly loading the gun, long before anything pulled the trigger. If inflammation can predict depression years ahead of time, there's an obvious next question. Could treating the inflammation directly treat the depression? Researchers tested exactly that, running a trial of an anti-inflammatory drug, originally built for arthritis, on patients with depression that hadn't responded to anything else. For most patients, it did almost nothing. But for one specific group, the patients who walked in with the highest inflammation markers already in their blood, it worked dramatically better than a placebo. Same pill, same dose, wildly different result, depending entirely on how much inflammation was already sitting in someone's body. That's not a coincidence you can wave away. That's a lock, matched to a very specific key. Here's the mismatch, and it's the actual reason this feels so relentless today. That shutdown was tuned for a world of real wounds, real parasites, real infection lurking in every scrape and every dirty water source. Today, the thing most likely to flip that same switch isn't a wound at all. It's loneliness. The researcher Steve Cole discovered that chronic social isolation switches on almost the identical inflammatory genes a real infection would trigger, while switching off the genes your body uses to fight viruses. Your immune system, watching you eat alone again, or scroll a silent phone at midnight, reads isolation itself as a wound. It cannot tell the difference between a spear wound and a lonely Tuesday. It just senses a threat and reaches for the same ancient shutdown either way, no questions asked. This is also why some of the plainest advice for a low mood keeps turning out to be true. Sleep, movement, and real face-to-face contact with another person all measurably lower the same inflammatory signals. This whole shutdown runs on. None of them feel like medicine. A walk outside doesn't feel like treating an infection. Neither does putting the phone down and sitting across a table from a friend instead of a screen. But to a body still running ancient sickness software, those small acts are read as evidence the danger has passed. Rest is available. The group is close by again. The wound, whatever it was, is finally being tended to. What if the reason those simple habits help isn't willpower at all, but a very old alarm quietly standing down? Stack all of that together, and depression stops looking like a personal failure and starts looking like an alarm with too many wires crossed. An ancestor's open wound has been replaced by a missed promotion, a breakup, a group chat gone quiet, a string of nights spent scrolling instead of talking to anyone. None of those things are an infection. But to a brain built for a world without antibiotics, a wound is a wound, whatever shape it happens to take. One large analysis of the research found that roughly 1 in 4 people with depression carry measurably elevated inflammation markers in their blood, and more than half show at least some elevation. Not every case. This clearly isn't the whole story for everyone, but nowhere near a coincidence either. Right now, hundreds of millions of people worldwide are living with depression, And most of them have been told, one way or another, that something in their character or their willpower is broken. What if a meaningful share of them are not carrying a broken brain, but an immune system still bracing for a wound that never actually opened? So the next time getting up feels like wading through wet sand, try asking a different question than, "What's wrong with me?" Ask what your body thinks it's fighting off. A rejection, a loss, a silence that's gone on too long. Understanding the mechanism doesn't switch it off instantly, and it is not a substitute for real treatment. It never will be. But it changes what the exhaustion means while you get there. It isn't proof that you're weak. It's proof that some very old part of you still thinks it's nursing a wound, even when the only injury left is an invisible one. Tell me in the comments, when your body shuts down like this, what does it actually feel closest to, a flu, an injury, or something else entirely? And if you want one video like this every week, on the strange, ancient logic hiding behind ordinary feelings, subscribe. Some mornings your whole body still feels like wet sand. Now you know it might not be your mind breaking down at all. It might be your oldest defense system, still standing guard over a wound that healed a long time ago.